22% of e-commerce orders are returned. Merchants are struggling to cope, but you can remove the roadblock. Doddle's digital returns platform allows carriers to provide their merchants with an enterprise-level solution for customer experience, analytics, and management of returns. When they succeed, you succeed. Visit doddle.com to learn more.
Welcome to this webinar, the e-commerce returns quandary and how to solve it. I'm very pleased to be bringing this content to you today. My name's Ian Kerr. I'm one half of The Last Mile Profits and also the host of the Postal Hub podcast. And joining us today is, of course, Marek Rzycki, who is my co-host on The Last Mile Profits. Also with us today, we have, hello Marek, there you are on the screen. Marek has an extraordinary background with DPD Group as VP Amazon Logistics EU and now as managing partner of Last Mile Experts. Marek, welcome. And also joining us today is Mike Richmond. Mike is the Chief Revenue Officer at Doddle. He's been with Doddle since 2014 when it launched, incidentally, and is responsible for the company's relationships with carriers globally, and he knows lots about returns. Hello, Mike. Welcome.
Hi, Ian. Hi, everyone.
And we've got Daniel Malouf joining us as well. Daniel is the Chief Solution Officer, Parcel Locker Solutions at Quadient. He was previously Chief Operations Officer for Quadient Shipping, and before that he held various senior roles in e-commerce and logistics at the Auchan Group. Have I said that right, Daniel? Is it the Auchan Group?
Auchan Group. Say it in French. Hello, everyone.
All right. So great to be here. Really looking forward to sharing this great content. I just want to kick things off by a few really quick personal observations about e-commerce returns, especially right now. We've seen in the last couple of months the e-commerce peak return season overlap with the actual peak season. So that is, people have started returning their parcels before Christmas, putting pressure on last mile capacity. We've seen lots of supply chain difficulties, meaning that retailers have been struggling to get their hands on products to actually sell things. How does e-commerce returns fit into that? And of course, we've got the other issue of, which has completely gone out of my mind, this is environment. Of course, what does e-commerce returns mean for the environment? Just a few things to kick things off. Marek, do you want to share a few thoughts? Because we've got loads of content, but do you want to share some thoughts on the current state of e-commerce returns?
Yeah, so it's delicately speaking a challenge. That's one of the reasons why we're here today, because one of the most common questions that we get is, how do we deal with this? People a while ago didn't see how important it was, but today retailers and e-tailers see that getting the returns issue right can really maximize their customer experience and return visits from customers. So it's a big deal. And why we see that it's an important topic to talk about is actually not too many people are doing it very well today. Maybe Mike, Daniel, you've got something to add on that one, because honestly, I think we're all aligned in terms of the issues.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely just jump in there. I think it's wildly overlooked. I think we're 25 years into e-commerce, and it's pretty staggering how little sophistication or technology or kind of how inefficient the returns process is. Like, broadly, and making sweeping generalizations, the majority of returns are the treatment for products is the same regardless of the product and regardless of the value. So every item gets returned, and there's very little analysis. We'll get into some of that during the webinar today. But yeah, I think it's a surprise how little innovation and investment there is in the area at a kind of very general level.
Just to build on your point, what I can say is that a lot of e-commerce players and stakeholders are very focused on one way of the customer experience, which is the delivery. But now they need to understand that they have to build the whole customer journey, and return is part of this customer journey, and it's absolutely key in the transaction with the brand.
We've just mentioned customer journey there, which I suppose is the right jumping off point for us to start talking about how e-commerce returns are currently working and perhaps even how they can be improved. So, Mike, we'll just bring up our first slide here. Do you want to just give us a quick overview of what you're talking about here with the returns initiation battleground?
Yeah, I mean, so this is not well understood terminology, but it's something we're trying to bring to the collective understanding. Like, returns initiation is, if I want to return an item, how do I do it? How does my merchant tell me to return that item? And having looked through the way returns happen in loads of different markets globally, it boils down to these 6 methods. You do it yourself, you use a carrier portal, you get a prepaid label, you use a merchant generated portal. And the predominance of the prevalence of these different methods is different in different markets. But I think the key distinction is the one we're trying to highlight on this slide. That the 2 methods on the right are what's called integrated returns, and the 4 methods on the left are unintegrated. And integrated in this sense means my return process is linked to the items I have ordered. So you put your order number in, and that determines what returns methodologies and what returns options you have to return an item. So for those 4 items on the left, DIY, customer service, prepaid label, carrier portals, broadly, regardless of the value of the product, and regardless of your value as a customer, you get exactly the same treatment. Everything gets shipped back. And if you jump onto the next slide here, and I kind of wanted to try and draw out how this happens with Boots, which is, Boots is one of the leading cosmetics and pharmacy retailers in the UK. How do I return an item bought from Boots.com? And effectively, you get told you can take it back to store. But if you want to ship it back, you download a returns form and you get a prepaid label, or you can download a free label to ship it back to Boots. So if I bought a £1 lipstick, or an £8 razor, or a £40 camera that's broken, I haven't bought a £1 lipstick, Ian, I can see you laughing. But regardless of what I bought, I get the same treatment, and that happens regardless of value. So Boots are paying Royal Mail £1.60 or £2 to return that item, and then they're destroying it. And that, to me, feels crazy. Like, it feels like, given the prevalence and the amount of data that we have about items and value and customer, and given the technology and the digital expectations of consumer, and given that also your point earlier, Marek, about environmental consciousness, we should be thinking more closely and more intelligently about, actually, products have a different value in the return cycle, consumers have a different value in the return cycle, and different treatments should be applied to different returns based on the data we have available.
Mike, but when you look at it, actually, probably there's 2 different discussions here. One is a discussion of what is economically rational, the discussion of the £1 lipstick, which of course you don't use, and how it's returned. And then you have a separate discussion of customer-centric returns process. So from the customer perspective, which I always think is the most important, it's about making it very easy. And clearly, it's not always the case looking at some of these examples. The second one is, okay, even if you make it customer-centric and great for the customer, one should also think about making it operationally, economically, and environmentally sensible.
So I think the most customer-centric returns method you can have is to give the consumer a label in the box. Give me a Royal Mail label and I'll drop it in the post box, or give me a USPS label and I'll stick it in my post box at the end of my drive and I'll put the flag up. That's the easiest thing you can do. It's just illogical. It's completely inefficient, and it annoys me, because we're an industry that should be moving on and using data and technology to do more in this space. But I think there's a disconnect between pure simplicity for consumer and actually just being a bit more mature and intelligent and efficient around the way we set up our reverse logistics supply chains.
But you know what, Mike? You can achieve that without the label. So you can have the model whereby if you have an app, you go, Daniel will like this, to the nearest locker, or PUDO actually, click a button on your app and in a contactless manner return something without even a label. Because then if it's a locker, the cell identifies the parcel and someone later on can put the label on. So, I think there are ways that you can have the best of both worlds, perhaps.
So I think that customer centricity around execution of the returns, Daniel will talk about this later as well, how you return the item and effecting the return is really, really important. You have to provide simplicity and convenience and ease. But there's also this question I'm kind of trying to allude to around the customer centricity around how you decide to return and what the merchant or carrier should be encouraging the consumer to do to initiate the returns process, and how we can use technology in this space to basically just improve that journey in a way the customer will expect.
Can I put it to everybody that I'll put my consumer hat here on, and I actually have a hat that says consumer on it. Imagine I'm a consumer. I agree with Mike when you're talking about the simplest way to do it may be to pop it in your letterbox. Can be difficult when you're in an apartment block or whatever. But let's look at what, say, Amazon does. It does basically what Matic was suggesting. Everything's run via the app. You can drop it off. You can get it picked up. There are so many different options. I mean, how would you compare that experience, Mike, to what else is out there in terms of having that multitude of options? I'll ask us a better question. Is having a multitude of returns options the way to go, or should an e-commerce retailer or a carrier even be focusing on the most efficient or the most cost-effective or the cheapest, dare I say it?
Yeah, no, I think having multiple returns options is absolutely key. But what Amazon does brilliantly is Amazon has invested, and Amazon has obviously the resources to invest that no one else has in the technology around how they process that return. So little known fact, if you go through the Amazon returns journey and you're returning something that under £5, they say just keep it. I don't want that back, because they're paying a carrier £2 to get that back. They don't want it, and they're just going to destroy it anyway. Or, I don't know if this is still the case with Amazon. If you return an item and you say, I just don't want that item, I don't want it, you pay £3.99 to return the item. But if you say it didn't meet the description on the website or the details were inaccurate, you don't pay to return the item. What they're doing is they are taking the consumer data and the product data, and they are changing the returns journey for that. Now, what Amazon, as I said at the start, Amazon can do this because that's Amazon. But how do we enable other merchants who don't have the resources and the technology kind of background that Amazon has to provide a similar experience? And where does that innovation come from?
And I think this is the really the big issue, isn't it? The big e-commerce, and it's not just Amazon. There are several other really big players that can manage this. They've got the systems and the support. The challenge is for mid-sized players or players that historically were not so much in e-commerce, and how can they make it work? I'll just add one other thing, because I was actually on, believe it or not, a little known piece of news. I spent a day on a customer service line in the US, and it's exactly as you say. If the customer's unhappy, goal number one, that customer must leave the call happy. And I had a concrete example. I was shocked myself. It was around the time, shows how long ago it was, when there were the hurricanes in America. And someone ordered a generator for about $800. And it came a day late. And the lady said, well, actually, it's no use to me anymore because I needed it yesterday. The cost of shipping that generator back was so significant. Amazon said, I checked with my supervisor, and the supervisor said, of course, let the lady keep it. Happy customer. In the big picture, the cost of taking the return would be more significant. So there's method in their madness, I believe.
Let's have a look at a bit of the breakup by country now. If we move, I hope we've moved to the next slide. So what's happening at the moment in various markets? Mike, do you have some quick comments on what this actually means?
What the Trivial Pursuit chart looks like. Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of. Thank you. I knew it would remind me of something.
So what we have done is we've got some research which we'll be sharing to the attendees of this webinar, a link to get that research after the event. But effectively, we studied the top 100 merchants in each of the markets on screen and looked at how their initiation of returns starts. And you can see that a majority of the top 100, the best merchants, in all of those markets still has a non-integrated approach to returns, which I think just tries to highlight that point, which I think is kind of crazy. And if you look, that's the biggest merchants. If you look in the medium-sized merchants or the smaller micro merchant segment, you see a massive, tiny purple segment of integrated returns. And I think this is just going to be, despite what Daniel's going to come on and say shortly, for me, this is this initiation battleground is going to be a real key battleground for the market over the next few years, because some merchants will do what Amazon have done. They can invest in that. Other merchants will buy technology from technology providers, like new VC-backed startups in this space, and there are a number in the UK, in Europe, in the US. And effectively, those businesses, as a technology provider, have gone, there's a gap here. Merchants can't do it, and carriers aren't doing it. I'm going to sit between the merchants and the carrier, and I'm going to provide a technology solution to improve the returns experience for customers. And I'm going to improve the value opportunity. So they might do stuff, and I think that'll be a real area of investment for the VC kind of back community and the PE back community. But actually, our position as Doddle is carriers have got to do more. And there was a conference in October, Leaders in Logistics, I think it was, and two carriers were asked, like, what do you think about returns and what's your perspective? And one prominent European carrier said, I think returns are great for business. The more returns, the better. This is wonderful, and I like that volume. They saw themselves as, I just moved those parcels. The other carrier was very clear that the merchant problem was their problem. Their customer's problem was their problem. And they saw themselves as having to step in to support their merchants in providing solutions that can help with this whole problem of returns. Because if the carrier is just a pipe, the carrier gets disintermediated. If the carrier is the pipe or the service provider, but also is providing solutions to merchants that help them with this challenge, then I think that they deepen their relationships and they add a lot of value to this whole. I guess I see returns as pretty fundamentally important, particularly in sectors like apparel, to the success of e-commerce.
I actually support that with an example. I think that, and this is going out on a limb, but I think it's really the case. One of the most significant reasons for InPost's incredible success in Poland was the fact that, number one, they understood what you just said. Number two, they were the first, they offered free returns. And I have to admit, I was on the supervisory board and I said, guys, why on earth are we offering free returns? Now, I'm going to admit to a mistake. I was wrong. And I think it's actually something that allowed them to stand head and shoulders above the competition. So, carriers need to do their bit. But let's be very honest. If the e-tailer or the retailer, whatever we want to call it, doesn't understand how big the issue is, doesn't put pressure, it isn't going to happen.
Can I ask a quick question before we move on to the next slide? One of the other things that I wanted to mention in my introduction was the profitability of retailers. And Mike, you posted something on LinkedIn recently that indicated that retailers' profitability is being squeezed. Is this another reason why carriers need to be thinking about solutions, retailers need to be thinking about how to better serve customers and to sort of help keep those costs down, and allied with all those other things we've talked about, the currently issues when it comes to e-commerce returns?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think for certain segments of the e-commerce market, returns is probably the most important factor in determining profitability. There was right now, alongside maybe supply chain costs, there was a Morgan Stanley report a year or two ago that showed how at the start of lockdown, how ASOS's returns rate had reduced because customers weren't returning items. And that had a £70 million impact on the profitability of ASOS, which operates at very high multiples of profit. And so I guess there's very small tweaks in this space can have a dramatic impact on overall success. And I think that goes back to that point I was making earlier. Like even ASOS, even with the might of their intelligence and ability, they did an announcement a couple of years ago where they said we're going to ban serial returners. Was one of their moves. We're going to ban serial returners, and it went down really badly with some of their audience because I think they banned a segment that were really highly profitable and bought a lot from ASOS, which is a bad thing, and that sort of thing. So I think there's so much more we can do to better understand and be more efficient in the returns process.
Jan.
So go on, Daniel. Go on.
Yeah. When we talk about profitability, you can look at the cost savings on one side, but what I'm looking at is the customer loyalty. And if the customer experience on return is bad, you will lose a customer, and it costs you a lot to acquire the customer again. So we have to be very careful when we consider that topic. If you look at it only by cost savings, you may make mistakes. My personal view is that we have to have the overview and customer loyalty is key.
I tend to really agree with that. I mean, the precursor wasn't even an e-commerce player, but for those who remember Marks and Spencer in the UK, when I was a lad, one of the reasons that most of my family bought there, we knew no problem at all. You've got a really easy, no quibbles return, and it's the same, I think, with e-commerce. I'll just say one thing: big e-commerce actually have a pretty clever model. They will never talk about it, but what happens is they check the number of returns you have versus what you're buying. And if over a long period of time, and they've got a clever model that analyzes it, you are actually misusing the system. And that's a very, very small group of people. So those are the ones you're really losing on, then steps generally are taken. But certainly, I think it's somewhat suboptimal to go publicize, yeah, if you're a serial returner, we're not going to serve you.
But that might be available, Marek, with an Amazon or an eBay or a Zalando or whoever it might be, where they have such an amount of volume data. I guess what's interesting and what, like, zooming forward 10 years maybe, which businesses can see that across multiple retailers? Australia Post can, USPS can, Royal Mail can. Actually, there are platforms who can do the same, Shopify, maybe the Metapacks of the world or those guys. But I think there's an interesting opportunity for that insight about serial returners or return value to actually be shared more broadly across multiple merchants, where you create a value out of it. It's not something that I think is in the offing anytime soon, because I think it takes a couple of moves. There's a few more steps to get there, but I think it's an interesting area for innovation.
Well, I was going to talk about serial returners a little bit more, but I think time is marching on. We might want to move on to our next discussion point when we look at the next slide. That's what consumers want. What do consumers really know what they want? That's another question.
I would say yes, I think so. So as mentioned by Mike, return initiation is absolutely key. And at the same time, what counts for the consumer is obviously the whole customer journey. So if we listen to the consumer, what do the consumers tell us? First of all, they tell us that they want to have the choice of their drop-off point. As we said, they want to be able to bring their product back to the store, but they really want as well to be able to do it at a PUDO, at a collection point. And especially they want to choose the most convenient for them. That's what they're looking for. So that's why what I can say is that they want proximity. And they want the drop-off location. This is our studies. They want the drop-off locations to be at less than 5 minutes from their home. This is the distance that we can identify between the home and the collection point, 5 minutes. And that's why at Quadient, we really believe that density of the PUDO network is absolutely key. And finally, my point is that consumers want the return process to be easy and quick. So if we say convenience, easy, and quick returns, this is absolutely the recipe to the brand loyalty. That's why we are convinced that we need to push for density, and that's why we believe in the Parcel Locker solution.
And in a way, Daniel, wouldn't you agree that the other advantage of out-of-home is it takes the cost dramatically down, because there's nothing more expensive than sending a dedicated courier to pick up one parcel, to wait whilst the customer is packing it or repackage because it wasn't packaged, maybe not find the customer there at all. So actually, one of the ways to deal with the issue that Mike mentioned earlier is to have this alternative option of an out-of-home network for returns.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, look to the deliveries first. Even the deliveries, we all know that home deliveries are more expensive than the out-of-home deliveries. We know that. At the same time, people are still preferring the home deliveries, and in every country, the mix is mainly towards home deliveries, but it costs a lot. If you look now to the return, I mean, if you ask carriers to go to your home and pick up the parcel on each home, each apartment, it will be crazy. They cannot do it. They will have workforce constraints. The cost will be very high. So that's why I strongly believe that PUDO networks and Parcel Locker networks are the solution for returns as well as C2C. I mean, maybe we will talk about C2C flows, but this is the solution for this kind of flows, which are return flows or from a consumer to another consumer, because we need then a dense PUDO network.
So I agree with you completely, Daniel. I think the two caveats to that would be one, our good friends in Japan, who we'll talk about shortly as a case study, where actually there is a real home, there's a service culture, and they will pick things up from your home. But the other one I think is interesting in that space of like initiation and link to how you get the item into the network is Royal Mail have done a lot of stuff recently for Parcel Collect, where the postie is already coming to your door anyway, and can he pick up a return? I'm the biggest, I'm a massive out of home fan anyway, so I'm definitely in the out of home camp. But I think it's going to be interesting to watch Parcel Collect as a Royal Mail service and see whether that can solve the challenger on the doorstep, because they're going there anyway, and use that journey as a way to basically also pick up C2C shipments or returns, and whether that becomes a blueprint for other carriers who've got a USO globally to get parcels into networks. I think it's going to be hard, because I think it's much easier for a consumer to work out whether to drop it off whenever they want than to arrange a pickup on the doorstep.
Well, before somebody we all know jumps in the chat and says, all about residential parcel lockers, I want to mention a couple of things when we're talking about collections from home. A number of posts have done what Mike just described. Poston has done it. Australia Post has trialled it. But I want to mention Unpost. Unpost rolled out basically low-tech, as in key-operated home parcel lockers, because it's a very suburban kind of delivery mix there, as opposed to high-rise apartments. And those little parcel lockers, I'll call them, or parcel box, whatever you want to call it, key operated, you can use them for returns as well. Very simple. You book it the night before, drop it in there, and the postie picks it up during the day. And this fits into the grander narrative at postal operators about what are you going to do with especially letter delivery carriers, the posties who are delivering letters, who have got less and less letters to deliver, but still have to travel the same routes. How can you fill up their pannier bags? So perhaps returns is the answer. Returns are the answer. Returns is the answer. You all know what I mean. Anyway, I think it's going to be an interesting one to watch, as Mike said, especially as it's also not that new a service. When you think about how for years postal operators, for example, the US Postal Service, would collect customers' letters they leave in their letterbox. So we're taking an old solution.
Actually, it's really good you mentioned this. This is going to be a topic for, as you know, a webinar in a while, because La Poste is doing some really good stuff in this space, and it's all about the handheld device that the postie has. The only thing I'll say is, even though it is customer centric, at the end of the day, it's with the postie coming anyway, it's more efficient. Although the reality is today, the postman doesn't visit every single address, so you'd have to make extra visits. So you need to take that into account. But I've got one other thing that I find really quite sexy, because I think this is it's all a tech space. Imagine you put something in a locker, and if it's a predefined value, and you've got a good track record, imagine if you could immediately have that item credited. There are already experiments with this with PUDOs in the US, and I think there's so much that can still be done. That, from a customer perspective, if I know the minute that I drop it off at a PUDO or a locker, immediately it's credited. Wow, that's cool.
That happens. That is happening today with Amazon. That is happening today with Amazon into lockers in the US. You get the money before you've left the store.
Which is, I think, part of this new customer experience, but it's about really diving deep. Sorry, Amazon phrase, diving deep and seeking to really, understand what can you do to improve the customer experience. In Poland, it's locker based. From my perspective, nothing is easier. Daniel's going to like this, but it's really true. Nothing is easier than 24/7. I go to my nearest locker, which is even less than 5 minutes. It's actually 350 meters, which me walking is about 3 or 4 minutes. I get there, press the button on the app. Wow. The only thing that's missing is that I immediately get credited for the return.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, everybody. It's already, Marek and I have wrested control of this webinar. We've gone off on our own little tangent. But in fairness, Luke did ask a question about this in the chat. So Luke from IPC, I hope that we've answered your question there about the pickup from home service from Royal Mail. We might move on, unless there's anything else we want, because I think, actually, I do have one other question. And this is maybe something that people can't answer right now. I'll be interested to see what the attitude towards, when it comes to customers, what their attitude towards dropping off returns at a PUDO or a parcel locker compared to getting it collected from home, how that compares to the existing delivery arrangements, residential versus out of home, because there's a very broad spread around the globe of how people receive their e-commerce deliveries. That's one for us to think about, perhaps, rather than me further derailing this webinar.
You know what? I can't resist. Quick comment. The reality, and I don't know, Mike, Daniel, what your view is, but I'm a really intense e-commerce user. And actually, why I prefer, even when I get a free to-door pickup, I prefer going to a locker or PUDO because I choose when. And sometimes if I'm in a hurry or I'm going on holiday or something else, I don't want to wait. I just want to go to the locker, drop it off. And I think even if it's not the only solution, it's one, isn't it, Daniel?
Yeah, Mark, you're right, and we can see that in the consumer behavior. So it's part of one slide that I have in this presentation. But if you look to what we have built in Japan with our partner Yamato, when we achieved a high density network, then suddenly we saw people using it really, and the adoption is really increasing. And they are using it mainly for the C2C flows, which means that even with this collect from your home solution that is really existing in Japan, people are using lockers because it's just convenient. It's at less than 5 minutes walk. They decide when they want to do it, and it's working very well. And the volume is just huge on C2C.
I've just brought up
and
this
is a good evidence.
There we go. So, Daniel, here we've got the slide here about why you say parcel lockers are the best option for returns. You've already half covered this slide. Is there anything else you want to add in while we're on this topic of using parcel lockers for returns?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the 24/7 availability is something important, and we achieve that thanks to the outdoor model. It's a better customer experience than the manual PUDO, because here we are talking about out of home. In the out of home network, you have manual and automated. We strongly believe that automated is a better customer experience because you don't have to wait in line, and this is a huge difference. And then what we have now, we have a customer satisfaction measurement, and we have the NPS, and it shows really a strong increase of the NPS, a strong improvement of the NPS when you move from a store or a manual PUDO to the automated solution, to the parcel locker. And when I say huge, I mean we have experience with customers when they moved from 75 to 92% of customers that were satisfied by the service when they moved from manual to automated, plus 17 points, which is huge. So that's why we strongly believe in this solution that is part of what we call the out-of-home network.
I want to ask a question about... Oh, sorry, go on, Mike, go on.
All right, you allow me to go. I agree with the statement. Why parcel lockers are the best option for returns, with a kind of star, an asterisk that's like, as long as there's enough of them. As long as there's that density that Daniel, because if you look at the UK, right, InPost are growing their network in the UK. They have maybe, they maybe have 3,000 lockers in the UK, and so that's not enough at the moment to give them national coverage. No. Actually, the UK is a PUDO market, a parcel shop market for returns because of the growth of Hermes and the growth of Yodel and Collect Plus and DPD over the years. But I think where markets have got that density, and there is that established density, Japan, particularly Poland, some of the Nordics are getting there. France is certainly starting to invest in that space. You do start to see the density of the drop-off and return. What's interesting, I do think, though, is Amazon very rarely use their lockers for returns. Like they've got 4,000 or 5,000 lockers in the UK, and they use them really only on outbound. So if you try and return an item to Amazon in the UK, you don't get presented with the option to return it to a locker. It's hidden at the bottom, because their outbound fleet and their reverse logistics fleet are two separate fleets managed differently, and so their supply chains are different. And also then you have the challenge of two ways of using a locker. You have a competition for space when consumers can suddenly drop 20 items into the locker, which can potentially take the capacity away from the thing. So it needs to be if you're using lockers for returns, you need to be sophisticated in how you set up that supply chain, and I think you need to have the density as well.
But then that's a good point. What you need to do is to monitor the locker. You need to make sure that you have space, and you monitor the space. And that's what we are doing in Japan with our partner, which means that we have the data, we can share the data with our partner, and we can tell them at which point of time we can saturate the locker. And they can change their own process, because look, if you put yourself in the shoes of the carrier, that's great because your delivery agent can deliver parcels, and then the same delivery agent can pick up parcels for the return process or the C2C process. So this is very efficient, but for that you need to monitor the space, and exactly what we're doing. So you have to add business intelligence into your software. So software is key, Marek. I know you believe in that as well, but software is key. And when we talk about lockers, hardware is important, but software is key.
I completely agree. Software, I always call it the secret sauce, but I'll say something different. Everybody knows I'm a big fan of mixed networks. So actually, I think you're both right in the sense that lockers are great when you have them and when they're proximate. The reality is lockers are almost a sort of fixed element and cost, and it's not so easy to stretch them. So because of the way e-commerce works, that you have big peaks, I believe that you need a mixed network because then the lockers will be sufficient throughout the year, but you supplement them with something that's low cost and easy to do, which is a PUDO, which can be expanded more. So actually, you cannot, in my view, have an efficient network which isn't mixed. The two will give part of the solution, but something I expect is going to come, and actually could I ask you both your view on this one? This is completely unscripted, but I think that the idea of making a PUDO more automated, so you avoid the fact that Marek's got a bad day, he's operating a PUDO, you have a semi-automated process within the PUDO, so it's not so dependent on a human being. What do you think about that?
So let's take retail.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Go, Dan, you go.
Very quickly, let's take the retailer as an example. I'm quite certain you have a lot of retailers with us today. So when you deal with the click and collect volume or the return volume manually, obviously at one point of time, when you're above a certain threshold, it becomes an issue for the consumer and for the associates in the store. If you add to that capability lockers, then you have the right mix because you can manage a lot of your parcels through the lockers, but you still have people here. You still have a counter, and this is the right mix. So for retailers, it's easy to do, and that's for sure the right solution.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I almost think there's like there is innovation in the space around lockers around kind of hybrid-y type solutions on returns. So there's a locker, and then there's a parcel shop, and then there's stuff that's happening in the middle. And I think that stuff in the middle, like you're referring to, Marek, is like almost returns kiosks or label printers. And we've spoken to 5 posts already this year about self-service returns in a parcel shop environment. Some of the audience may have heard Marcus Wimmer at Post Expo talking about how they're investing, Austria Post are investing in self-service solutions. And I don't think that's necessarily, so it's not a parcel shop application and it's not a full service locker, there's stuff in between. And we demoed something at NRF last week or 2 weeks ago in New York, which we've been working on with a big US retailer around effectively returns kiosks in store where you can drop items into a single service solution with a label printer and a scanner, but just to process the returns in a store that doesn't necessarily need the full capacity of a locker. I
think this is a topic for a whole webinar in itself. I'll just share one thing, and I'm watching this with excitement, so watch this space. Żabka, which is Poland's version of 7-Eleven, is beginning to test, first of all, with specially designed lockers that fit into small spaces. So exactly what Daniel was saying, that you can offer both, but also I see a lot of opportunity for having methodology that allows you perhaps to go with an app, press a button, and the human gives you the parcel, but you don't have to have all the interaction. Can you give me your account number, your pass number, and so on? So let's watch this space, but I think there's a lot that can still be done there.
Now, everybody, we've got to get through a couple of questions before we get to a case study, which we're going to get to in just a moment. First of all, we've had a couple of questions come in about extra large parcels, or really the mix in the size of parcels that are being returned. So you might have Mike's £1 lipstick. You deserve so much better, Mike. You're a quality person. Compared to, say, the generator that Marek mentioned before. How are you going to return them? Part of me says, well, it just means you have to have a mix of returns methods. Mike, you're up first. What's your comments on that?
So you need to so you've got 2 options. I think you can't have a standard returns approach to that, because if you can't just say Royal Mail, go and pick all these things up, or or Arrow 2XL, go and pick up these parcels from a UK merchant. So your non-integrated way is call my customer service team, and we'll do that through a manual phone call, email back and forth and exchange. The way I think we will go to is a more integrated process where I'm on AO.com, big UK appliances online. I bought a dishwasher and I go into my orders section and I say, I've got a dishwasher. I then go through a digital journey, which allows me to get my options. They might say, what's wrong with it? It's broken. Can we send an engineer out? My whole point around returns initiation is I think merchants and carriers need to be thinking about that journey of discovery around what you should do should be a digital journey, not something that you are calling customer services for. And I think that will happen in a number of different ways.
And now it's time, everybody. By the way, we're going to launch our first poll. Exactly what Mike just mentioned there. Creating better returns. What matters more? Is it how the returns process starts, the initiation, or is it how the consumer gets rid of the parcel, the execution? I like that, getting rid of it. I think I might have written that. Just chuck it out the window. You're getting rid of it. Vote now. Oh, crikey, it's going crazy. Everybody's voting like crazy. Not that we're trying to influence the results. Marek, do you have a quick comment on this? Crikey, everybody's voting.
Yeah,
like mad.
tell me
Marek,
what you can see, because I actually, for some reason, I can't see the poll, but if you tell me where we're at, I'm happy to comment.
At the moment, it's 40-60 in favour of how the consumer gets rid of the parcel. It looks like it's
honestly,
settled there.
my view is, at the end of the day, it's both. It's got to be holistic. It's about ease of executing the process, and then ease of getting rid of it, if for want of a better word. I just say one thing, because I thought the previous discussion was really interesting. I can imagine this is a space people are going to get better and better at, and we're going to end up with several models. There's always going to have to be a bespoke service for the really big, heavy, ugly stuff. Because, let's say a suite of furniture for your living room, you're not going to take to PUDO. But I think you're going to have XL PUDOs, and I know that my friends at Group La Poste have started doing stuff there. So you'll have a standard PUDO, let's call it an XL PUDO, but that won't cover the really big stuff. And it's about what you said, Mike, I think, about having, a solution for each type of situation, because you cannot have one size fits all.
Now, I've shown the results here of the poll. 41% say it's how the return process starts. 59% say how the consumer gets rid of the parcel is more important. Interesting there. It was neck and neck there. I didn't try to unduly influence the results of that poll either. Now, I'll just get rid of that. We've got
to be fair, though, Ian, we didn't give the guys and girls out there a chance to say, actually, they're both important.
Yeah, no, well, there you go. Yeah.
They would have
in an
chosen
election,
this one.
you
That's
don't
why
get a
we
chance to
didn't
say,
give them
I like
choice.
both parties. So,
but just to come back to the large items as well, a very
Daniel.
quick comment. We are working currently with DIY retailers in the US as well as in France and in the UK. And we are improving the locker because we are building with them, co-designing with them large lockers that they call cages, so that we can manage as well large items, so that we keep one process. And for the consumer, it's always better. For the store associate, it's always better to have one process and not to have two processes to manage. And that is our target. With the same software, let's have one configuration of a parcel locker that fits maybe not all, but almost all, from the small item to the large one.
Now, I think we've got some great questions.
And you can see that already. You can see that already in the US in one of the Love store.
Ian, can I just jump in very briefly, because I think it's great. The only thing that I'll say is up until a certain size, because as a consumer, if I have the generator, which can fit in my boot and it's not such a big deal, I'll drop it off to the nearest XL PUDO or locker. But if it's, a whole suite of living room furniture,
agreed,
that will be somewhat less than customer centric. So there's always going to be this need for some kind of alternative solution.
Agreed.
Now, I'm just aware of the time. I'd really like for us to get to, we're going to have a quick look at a case study. We got a bit carried away there, everybody. And we'll have time for the questions, honest, I promise. So if we have a look at the next slide, and Mike, I think you're going to lead us off. You're talking about digital returns in Japan.
Yeah, I think people will do well to read this because it's relatively small and it's also in Japanese. So relatively quickly, we were given the opportunity to do this webinar with Quadient. Quadient and Doddle both partner with a business called Yamato in Japan. Yamato is a 100-year-old parcel carrier in Japan. They have 45% market share. They carry around 2 billion parcels a year. So they're a huge player and a wonderful business. And when it comes to e-commerce in Japan, we've talked about some of the nuances around, home delivery within 2-hour windows and 3 attempts to deliver that parcel to the customer's home on outbound. They really, really super serve their customers, and it's a very high service culture. But when it comes to returns, it's enormously unsophisticated. It's really, really kind of like the customer, over 50% of the leading 100 merchants require you to call the customer services team on a phone, an actual phone call, to generate a returns label. And then the next biggest way of returning an item is actually to call Yamato. So not Uniqlo, but a big Japanese merchant will say, call the carrier, you sort this out, it's your problem, get it back to them. So we created a digital returns platform, the screens of which you can see on this screen for Gap and for a number of the merchants in Japan, whereby you go through a digital journey, you choose your option to have it picked up from your house, which we talked about earlier as being important in Japan, or you can drop it into a location using a QR code. And then you get a load of pins on a map which tell you, here are your parcel shops, here are your Pack City lockers, and Daniel can come to some of the density of those Pack City lockers in Japan on the following slide.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So very quickly on the following slide so that we keep time for questions. But what you can see here is what we have built with our partner, with Yamato, and we were looking for density. We were at 5 minutes walk and we decided to go beyond that. And in one area of Tokyo, in one district of Tokyo, we decided to be at 3 minutes walk. And that's what you can see here. So our network was the green one, and then we added the red ones to be even closer to the consumer. And it's working. I mean, that's what we can show is that with 3 minutes walk, now we have 260% year-over-year growth in this district, volume-wise. While in our overall network in Tokyo, so in Tokyo, we have 5,000 lockers only in Tokyo, and we have a 200% year-over-year growth. So it's growing faster in this district where we had 3 minutes. So we have now the evidence that with density, we can improve usage and we can improve adoption.
Mark, do you have any questions on this or any comments you'd like to make?
I think density and proximity is the key thing. Very often I hear not so much about returns, but generally about out-of-home PUDOs and lockers, that our market is not an out-of-home market. And my answer is always the same. It's because no one has given you a proposition that is proximate and suitable. So I have no doubt, I'm going to again, twice today, go out on a limb and say, it's not if, but when out-of-home becomes a key part, not always going to be the majority, but it's going to be a key part of every market, both for outbound, but also for returns.
And for
nice. Dan, you have anything to add?
So my risk is mitigated.
Right. I think perhaps it's time for us to try and knock off a few questions because it doesn't even feel like it, but we're almost out of time. Time does fly when you're having fun. Now, where will I start? Mark Fallon, hello Mark, over there in the USA, has asked if we're going to address environmental sustainability. Well, I don't want this to really become a discussion about a circular economy, but Mike, is the environment part of the and the same question for you, Daniel, after Mike's answer, is the environment part of the conversation you have with carriers and the conversation you have with e-commerce merchants when it comes to returns?
Yep, massively. It comes out at all the different stages. But if we just think about the minute the customer's got something they don't want, the first bit of sustainability is not shipping something back which can be reused by that customer or that. So if the merchant is just going to destroy it or the merchant's partner is just going to destroy it, there's no point having a shipping journey which has carbon emissions linked to it to get it back, right? So that's the first bit. The second thing is then, how do I move those parcels? What is the most consolidated and efficient way to move those parcels? Sending every single one of ASOS's 15 million returns in the UK back as single parcels is 15 million individual journeys, which all have a carbon cost to all of them. So that's the kind of second bit. How do you consolidate returns at a PUDO location rather than through individual drop-off points or customer collections to make that more efficient that way? And then you get into the whole world of what happens in the world of reprocessing and resale. And I think we're starting to see businesses come together to build as a service partner to merchants all of those bits together. So returns initiation, working with parcel carriers, and then the reprocessing and the resale, and the remerchandising or the reuse of those goods in the back end.
Daniel, do you want to add anything?
I fully agree with Mike. We know today that the first reason of CO2 emission in the large cities is coming from vans that are delivering parcels. So consolidation is absolutely key for deliveries as well as for returns. And thanks to that, obviously, we will all reduce CO2 emission.
Now, I've got a message here from Marcus Wimmer. Oh, sorry. Go on,
Can I just jump in briefly? Because
yes.
We're about to launch a Green Last Mile report from Last Mile Experts, and data in there provided by InPost shows that in an urban area, it's likely that you will reduce the carbon footprint by 2/3 when you're using out of home in an urban area. And in a rural area, it can be as far as 90%. So this is not small stuff. It's a big deal, and it affects returns just in the same way as it does for first deliveries of an item.
Now, Marcus Wimmer, hello Marcus, from Austrian Post, has quickly made a comment here to say that Austrian Post is no longer experimenting. It processes 70% of its returns in Austria via this channel, the channel that we discussed before. That's a big figure. So ponder that one. I've also posted a link to the video that shows the self-service terminals. I'll put that in the chat there if anybody's interested in having a look at that.
We need to say they're good, don't we?
Yeah. Okay.
My German's
moving
not so
swiftly
good,
onwards. My German's not what it used to be. I'm not sure if we can answer this question. This is a very interesting question. What's the impact of percentage impact of bracketing on returns, and can it be measured accurately? And then, for those of you who don't understand or aren't familiar with the term bracketing, it's where someone might order 2 or 3 sizes of the one item of clothing, try them on, and return whatever they don't want. And that's called bracketing. And obviously there are returns involved in that as well. Any comments on that, anyone, before we wrap up?
As you say, very difficult to track and measure. I feel like I'm banging a certain drum today. But what I do think is crazy is that if a customer buys size 8 and size 9 pair of shoes, 90% of the time they're going to be returning one of those items. What seems to happen because most returns are non-integrated and effectively unsophisticated, no one's contacting the consumer and say, can you get them back? Whichever ones you don't want, can you send them back to me? And every day in a returns window from day 0 to day 28 has effectively a cost. So if you get them back on day 1, they might be worth 90% of their RRP. If you get them back on day 28, probably value is maybe 70% because those items have effectively, they might be out of season and they might have to go into sales stock. So it goes back to that point I was making about digital returns initiation. What we should be doing is interjecting earlier and allowing consumers to be promoted with the opportunity to return those items that they have bought that are bracketed earlier in the process, which improves the overall efficiency and therefore the sustainability of returns.
And Daniel, do you have any comments on bracketing that you've seen from your side? No, we've already talked it to death. All right.
Yeah, and I've always got a comment. Just one, I think it's exactly what Mike said just now. It's about helping people understand the ecological issues, that it actually, if they do things in a certain way, it can be more beneficial to the environment, and then, promoting that. So I think there's an awful lot that can be done in that space.
A few quick comments from the chat then, really quickly. Chris Jarvis says, improving the journey is key for brand loyalty. We need to keep it simple for the consumer. Now, I think there's a balance to be struck there between keeping it simple for the consumer, that might be label-less, versus having lots of options, which seems to be sort of the flip side of it. I'm not saying the two are necessarily incompatible. What's next? Merrick says, in addition to free returns, InPost was one of the first carriers to introduce label-free returns. Label-free returns, I can say as a consumer, I love it. I love it. It means I don't have to dust off the printer and hope that it works when it comes to printing out a label. What's next? Using PUDOs for high-value items. I think there's a couple of things in here. One is using PUDOs for high-value returns for high-value items. Who accepts liability for parcel loss when it's dropped off at a PUDO? So this is what suggestions that maybe parcels aren't looked after properly if they get dropped off the PUDO. I'm not sure if Rollo is saying that. But there's also the issue of when you assess the resell worthiness. What's the word? Yeah. The ability to resell an item that's been returned. Let's start with the first thing. Can you use PUDOs for returns of high-value items? Are there any risks there? And the same question for parcel lockers. Is there any risks when it comes to using lockers or PUDOs for high-value returns?
I would say that PUDOs are a better place, or lockers are a better place to return high-value items than, So still probably the majority of returns in the UK go back through post boxes. I'd imagine. I don't actually know the data, but a lot of stuff just gets put through a post box rather than dropped in anywhere. So you get no proof of that item being lodged. So a PUDO or a locker gives you some digital receipt or physical receipt, if that's the way the PUDO works, to get that item into the network. You then, as a consumer, can go to the merchant and say, "I've given that back." Typically, PUDOs have an agreement with their carrier where if it's a third-party location, they will be restricted to a certain amount of liability, but very rarely is that enforced where there's a claim made against the parcel shop. I think this is a huge benefit of a parcel locker, that you don't have that third-party, and a typically chaotic shop format parcel shop environment where parcels are stored in a mixed estate. Lockers don't have that. The parcel is there for the carrier to pick up when they want to get it.
Yeah. And to build on your point again, software is key. What we are providing is the full tracking. So that means then when you drop off your parcel, we know it. Then when the carrier is coming to collect it, we know it. And when it is delivered, we know it. And all this is monitored through the tracking capability of the software. So this is another way as well to bring security to the whole process.
I can even imagine, guys, a scenario using new tech. When I had to do my COVID test in the UK, I had to photograph or film myself when I was doing the test. And I can imagine something similar that checks when I'm putting something into a locker, or similar manual human being checking when I bring to PUDO for high value. So actually, I could imagine it becomes a much safer tool for very high value versus the courier who's in a hurry, trying to pick up parcels everywhere, doesn't have time to specifically check. And not suggesting any consumers would do this, but may end up coming back with a brick in a box.
That's actually how I do my Christmas presents. I just give people a brick in a box, and they think I've given them something massive. It's just a brick in a box. Now, it's 3. We've reached the hour mark, but I have one final question, which I think is really rather important, and that is regarding, and someone's prompted us here somewhere in the Q&A. The environment. We talk about the environmental impact of returns. Should or could we even, in the e-commerce and delivery sectors, give consumers information about the environmental impact of their returns when they're returning? So say if you choose this returns channel, it might be fast, you might get your money back faster, but it'll have more emissions. I don't know what the exact matrix might be. But any comments from the three of you as we wrap up?
I would say yes, we could, and yes, we should.
Yes, we could. Yes, we should.
It's a no-brainer. Because, of course, we should. Consumers want to know.
And just Daniel? To share with you a discussion I had with one French retailer a few weeks ago. So this French retailer was totally focused on this environmental measurement and CO2 emission, as you said. And we started that 3 years ago. So now we have KPIs, we have measures. We are not yet where you say, Jan, we are not yet at the point where we can share that on each transaction, but we have KPIs, which is absolutely key so that we can demonstrate that we are reducing CO2 emissions, and we know what are the flows that are the more environmental friendly, I would say.
Ian, you're going to be shocked to hear this, but I'm going to say nothing to add.
Well, write down the date and the time, everybody. 25th of January, 3:02 CET. Marek had nothing to add. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Daniel and Mike, I just want to give you a quick opportunity. Is there anything else you want to quickly add or any points that you want to emphasize as we wrap up?
No, thank you for this moment. I just would like to say that for the next webinar, we can talk about open networks as well, which is a very good
It was one of the questions. I didn't get to it. It was one of the questions. Should we have open networks for returns?
We need half an hour. I strongly believe we need open network, but this is another discussion, guys. Thank you.
Well, there we go. We know that you and Marek are going to furiously be in agreement over that one. Mike, do you have any final comments before we let everybody go and get on with their day?
No, not for me. No, thank you for everyone's time.
Thank you, everybody, for taking part. Thank you to everybody who asked a question. Thank you for your participation in the chat today. Thank you again to Doddle and Quadient for your support of this webinar and helping keep these last mile profits events free. There's nothing much else to say, but if you want to find out more about the solutions that Doddle and Quadient have, go to, well, Mike, what's the website for Doddle?
Doddle.com.
Doddle.com, nice and simple. And Daniel, if people want to find out more about Quadient's solutions?
Quadient.com.
How sophisticated. And Marek, thank you very much as well. That's all from us today. Thank you very much for your attendance again. Enjoy the rest of your day.